Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons in wartime. All right, so we're sitting in June 2022, and we have to talk about something that is happening. This has never happened before in the history of Dungeons and Dragons, and that is Americans are playing Dungeons and Dragons in wartime. Okay, so and you're like, wait, Scott, there's been war before. I'll explain it. Keep up. All right. Okay, so why is this the first time, really, in the history of Dungeons and Dragons since its birth in 1974, that Americans are playing Dungeons and Dragons in wartime? Well, here we go. Okay, so let's just kind of tick it through. 1974. Okay, at this point, the Vietnam War is spinning down. It's either done or it's functionally done. Right, so I don't really think Vietnam actually counts as far as Dungeons and Dragons because it was either finished or it was, in its last gasps of a war, right? And so it's in its last gasps of combat going back and forth, so it really doesn't functionally stick. It wasn't a part of a long period of Dungeons and Dragons. It might have been there at the very, very beginning, but it wasn't enough to. But everybody already knew, this is spinning down. It's almost at its end, right? So that one doesn't count. The '80s, you see a lot of skirmish, right? There's some skirmish. In the early 1990s, the Soviet Union falls apart, right? That's pretty big. That's huge, right? Then we do see some, and then basically, I think we had the Gulf War, and then also we had shock and awe after 9/11, and we had and then we had Afghanistan, right? So you're like, Scott, those are all wars. They're not. Here's why. Okay, they're skirmishes, right? In my humble opinion, these are all skirmishes. And you're like, why? Why don't these count? Well, here's why, right? Like, there's no near peers, right? So all of those wars, America rolls in. Everybody knew America was going to win, and America did win, right? Up until what's happening right now, and we'll talk about Putin in one moment. Up until, the 2022 war in Europe, all the rest of this was completely controlled. Were skirmishes, completely controlled with absolutely no stakes, right? So basically, America was under absolutely no threat. There was no ability there was no battle between any near peer nations. This was all us going into other countries and like, hey, settle down. We're gonna shell everything with tanks. We're gonna drop a whole bunch of bombs and everything. But just calm down. After we're done, we're not gonna take the land. And you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna rebuild everything we knocked down. There's no stake. This is all performative violence, right? Like there's nothing happening here of significance, right? And that's really exactly what happened, right? Afghanistan. What was the result? Nothing, right? Like no land changed hands, right? There was no result from that. And it was the same from all these other wars, right? It was America using a whole bunch of weapon systems in a space. There was plenty of skirmish. Nothing, like no land changed hands, nothing. There was no result from any of it. It was performative skirmish. That's all it was. There were no wars, right? Woo! Welcome to 2022. Biden got us in the middle of it, baby. Because he is a Dem-Dov president. Putin was like, oh, I could just stomp the living... I could just walk in and figuratively just, utterly destroy any respect that your own people have for you. And I can walk over you exactly the same way I walked over President Obama. I took Crimea under him, and I'm going to take the rest of Ukraine under you. Right? Get ready for real war. Real war. Near peer, baby. Mad question mark? Mutual assured destruction? Let's talk about NWs. Let's talk about NW arcs. Let's talk about half the cities of America blowing away in ash. Right? This ain't performative violence. This ain't a skirmish. Right? This is for real stakes. And if we win, Putin's like, we keep the land. This ain't about us using bombs and tanks to knock down a few buildings and then literally pay to set them right back up. This is going to matter, right? This is the 10-pint price times hundreds of thousands, right? Like, and this is the real deal. Welcome to actual war, right? So for the first time in history, Americans are like, wait a second, Russia could build a 50-mile bridge over the Bering Strait and take exactly the same train of equipment that he's using to commit his war in Europe right now, that Finland and a whole bunch of neutral countries are like begging to get into NATO over. And he's like, yeah, we threaten the world. And not just with NWs, but with literal, like, we have a real military and we will really use it. And we will really march it over the Bering Strait. Like, there's no countries that feel safe. All the peace nonsense, all the, like, global distribution patterns, all of it is under question now, because this is not a skirmish. This is legit, full-on, brink of World War III war, and we are at day 100. 100 days of war in Europe. This is real, right? And in addition to that, so this is different than anything that has happened in the history of Dungeons and Dragons. So at no point in American history has any American been like, could we be invaded? And one of the first answers coming to mind is yes. Like, Putin is fangs out, claws out. This is real. This is not performative violence. This is not skirmish with no stakes. This is real, near-peer war, right? And America's feeling it, and America is, frankly, in my humble opinion, very clearly already at war with Europe just through the proxy of Ukraine. There you go, right? So what does this mean for you as a Dungeon Master? What does this mean for you as a Dungeons & Dragons player? First of all, we need to acknowledge this is a different time. This has never, and by the way, every single thing, as an American Dungeon Master, as an American Dungeons & Dragons player, I'm not speaking about any other country in the world. I know you guys have your own, like, your world's different than ours. We just, Americans just roll different. It's, it would be inappropriate for me to say that this is the case for any other country. But I am an American DM, Dungeon Master. I am an American Dungeons & Dragons player, and I know what it likes to be. And now, for the first time in my life, I know what it likes to be dungeon mastering and being a Dungeons & Dragons player at a time of war, right? So what does it mean for us? How does it change things as Dungeon Masters and as Dungeons & Dragons players? It's a good question. So as Dungeon Masters, I think we need to understand that our players are far more sensitive, and that their worlds are fundamentally different and far more broken than ever before, okay? One of the things that you need to realize is, I'm seeing this very much. In where I live, there are a lot of people who are having to move, right? I'm routinely talking to people who are moving into hotels and getting ready to move to I live on the East Coast. The land is outrageously valuable, and a lot of people just cannot afford to live where they're at anymore, right? So you need to just be aware that every single thing your players are doing now is harder, right? Gas is going through the roof. President Biden has no ability to control it, and that means that every single thing they buy is far more expensive. And unless your players are very rich, they have very real-world concerns about bread, water. If any of your players actually have children, God forbid they have a baby, in America, you can't even feed babies now. Like, there's a question mark behind being able to feed a baby. It's like, we've never seen anything like this in America. So as a Dungeon Master, you really need to understand that your players are under more strain and more stress than at any point in your Dungeon Mastering history. There is nothing like what is happening right now. I actually think the best way to understand what's happening in America is the entire nation simultaneously is being gentrified. Every single inch of American land is being gentrified right now, right? I've had multiple conversations with people who are moving. People are being kicked out of apartments. People are like losing their homes. It is bad. And the idea that this isn't impacting your Dungeons and Dragons players, it is. You can trust and believe they are under more strain and more stress. That means as you go forward, right? Two things. One, I think your game's more important than ever, okay? Your people don't have hope in their real life, right? But in the fantasy world that you have built for them, hope still remains. And that, 2 hours, 4 hours a week might be the brightest spot in their week. That is incredibly important, right? The other issue is it is very hard for people to improve themselves. Here, when we talk about Dungeons & Dragons on this channel, right, are you taking Dungeons & Dragons farther? And is Dungeons & Dragons taking you to the limit of what you can be, right? And we are trying to, push the envelope on exactly what Dungeons & Dragons is capable of doing, right? And we are trying to use specifically Dungeons & Dragons to improve ourselves, right? And that task, because every single resource that's needed to improve yourself is far more difficult. And so the self-improvement that's happening through your Dungeons & Dragons game for you and your players is 100 times more valuable than it was literally in January of 2020, right? Because this whole nightmare erupted in February, right? Near the February 28th, at the end of February. So literally every year prior, your players had a chance of improving themselves external to Dungeons & Dragons. Those chances are evaporating, and all the tools and everything that they would use to expand themselves and improve themselves are swiftly disappearing. But Dungeons & Dragons, because of its incredibly unique structure, is the one place where you don't need class and money to improve yourself and improve your life, improve your vocabulary, improve your determination, improve your will, improve your empathy, improve everything about yourself, right? Through Unbound immersion, right? And so your game has become far more important and far more valuable. As a Dungeons & Dragons player, what can you do to acknowledge where you are within this space, right? So one of the things that I would say is the most important thing for you as a Dungeons & Dragons player is to really be supporting your fellow Dungeons & Dragons players, specifically beyond the game, right? You come together, you enjoy Dungeons & Dragons during that weekly campaign session, right? Or bi-weekly, whatever your frequency is. But more than ever, your fellow players need you in their lives. They need your support. They need your kindness. They need your tolerance. They need you just checking in and being kind and tolerant and looking after them as they seek to improve themselves through the Dungeons & Dragons campaign, right? So in the one area that is not evaporating because they lack wealth, right? It's just absolutely critical. Your Dungeons & Dragons campaign was always valuable. It's 100 times more valuable now because we are dungeon mastering and we are playing Dungeons & Dragons in war for the first time in history. That's my opinion. What's yours? Let me hear in the comment below. Please consider liking and subscribing. Have a wonderful millennium.